What's up everybody, D-Man back to a brand new video, and today it is time for another deep dive video essay. We live in uncertain times. There are threats all around us, both internal and external. Whether that threat comes in the form of a human being or an invisible virus is irrelevant. Things seem bad. And in these uncertain times of heightened emotions and chaos, I found myself returning to the kaiju films I grew up with. Not only because they're a comfort blanket for me, not just because they're familiar, but because they stand for something greater. And today, I'm gonna talk about one such example. This video is titled, Mothra Vs Godzilla is a Beautiful Movie. It's not titled this because the cinematography is fantastic, or because the music is emotional and powerful, or because the visual effects are still mind-blowing to this day, or because the cast does an excellent job bringing to life a wonderful script written by Shinkichi Sekizawa under the masterful direction of Ishiro Honda. Although all this is true, and more, this video is called Mothra Vs Godzilla is a Beautiful Movie due to what the film represents. It would be really easy for me to sit here and review this film. Mothra Vs Godzilla is one of my all-time favorite movies, and going into this video, I wanted to do nothing more than to re-review this film for the first time since Godzillathon Episode 6, a video which was published in 2017. But I'm not going to do that. Rather than discussing the movie as a whole, I wanted to focus this video on just the themes and messages of the movie. On the surface, Mothra vs. Godzilla is the story of good versus evil. There's the good guys and the bad guys. There's the good monster and the bad monster. The bad guys start doing bad things and the good guys step in to stop them. But it's clear that the film is about much more than that. Mothra vs. Godzilla isn't a surface level film. I've seen some people interpret this movie as a story about Japan versus America in a post-war world. This is a bad interpretation of the movie. Before I discuss what I think this movie's actually about, I'll explain why this understanding of the film isn't correct. People who argue that Mothra vs. Godzilla is an us versus them story for the Japanese focus too much on the nuclear allegory in the film, disregarding everything else that happens. Mothra vs. Godzilla returns the atomic aberration to his original status as King of Destruction. After Godzilla's more animalistic portrayal in 1955's Godzilla Raids Again, and his more comedic portrayal in 1962's King Kong vs. Godzilla, 1964's Mothra vs. Godzilla is the movie that solidifies Godzilla as an act of God. With a purposeful grimace and a terrible sound, Godzilla is established as an invincible and unrelenting force. His appearance is signaled by radiation, and his presence leaves behind nothing but death and ash. Godzilla absolutely reclaims and retains his status as a walking nuclear bomb in this film. As such, many people will argue that Godzilla represents America, because America had freshly dropped 2 atomic bombs and 1 hydrogen bomb on or near Japanese soil, causing the country lots of trouble. These same people will argue that the people of Japan symbolize the outsider. This is revealed when Akira Takarada's Ichiro Sakai, Yuri Hoshi's Junko Nakanishi, and Hiroshi Kazumi's Professor Mirai make their way to Infant Island. The island has been decimated by atomic weapons that have forever changed the environment and the living conditions. The majority of the island is a barren wasteland where plant life is eradicated and the skin on a turtle has melted off, leaving behind a strange, sad mutant creature. I had to mention that guy. The Infant Islanders are quick to blame our film's heroes for what happened, stating, the us versus them understanding of this movie sees Infant Island as a stand-in for Japan. It's a physical manifestation of the damage caused by atomic weapons. Our heroes, the outsiders, are forced to apologize for the actions of Relishika, the Americans. These people argue that Mothra is a symbol of the Japanese spirit. She rises up to stand against the atomic threat of America, but Japan loses, and from the ashes, a new nation is birthed. One mightier than the atomic bomb, one that can defeat it. I shouldn't entirely need to point out why this interpretation doesn't make much sense, since a lot of that is self-evident. For starters though, Japan is the nation under attack in this film. Why wouldn't they represent themselves? And Mothra representing the Japanese spirit doesn't make too much sense, because Mothra doesn't even want to help the Japanese people until over halfway into the film. And although Godzilla does represent the atomic bomb in this movie, he isn't a stand-in for America in this instance. The finger is never pointed at America in this movie, nor is it implied. The American military actually comes to help Japan partway through. And even though they are unsuccessful in their ambush of the kaiju Kaiju, they still try to defend the Japanese people. If the countries themselves are in this movie, wouldn't it make sense for them to represent themselves? But the biggest issue with this interpretation of the film is that the film isn't anti-America, it's anti-corruption. The movie isn't concerned with who the bad guys are in the slightest, it's concerned with what the bad guys mean. The human antagonists in this movie are two Japanese men. The argument could be made that the movie is anti-capitalist, which is an extension of American culture, but it's not. Although the film does portray at least 3 different businessmen as slimy people, 2 of which are the film's antagonists, it isn't trying to paint a bad picture of capitalism as a whole, but rather specific aspects of capitalism. The man in charge of the Typhoon 8 reclamation project hounds Sakai twice in the movie due to what he considers bad press affecting his business's reputation. But he isn't a bad guy, he's just a businessman. And although Yoshifumi Tajami's Kumiyama and Kenji Sahara's Torahata are both businessmen, they aren't evil because they're businessmen. The newspaper editor, who's played by Jun Tazaki, is also a businessman. And although he's seen as being very stern and sometimes puts Yu Fujuki's Jiro Nakamura too close to the action for comfort, he isn't a bad guy. Marata's one of the movie's heroes. He is helping to sway the public opinion towards helping Mothra in an effort to return her egg. Kumiyama and Torahata don't represent capitalism. They represent greed and corruption, the worst aspects of capitalism, but also the worst aspects of humanity as a whole. The movie isn't an us versus them story about the Japanese versus the Americans. It's about the good parts of humanity standing against the bad parts. It truly is the story of good versus evil. Mothra vs Godzilla is a story about humanity and what it means to be human. In the cast, we are provided with 3 characters who embody the good parts of humanity: Sakai, Junko, and Professor Mirai. Opposing them are Torahata and Kumiyama. Sakai, Junko, and Mirai are righteous and dignified. Torahata and Kumiyama are slimy and cynical. Torahata and Kumiyama bulldoze over everyone in their path, including each other, for their own personal gain. They abuse the trust and use a bunch of fishermen. They decide to profit off of Mothra's egg against the wishes of the public and the scientific community, while putting the entire nation at risk for profit. Not to mention, Mothra's egg contains a living creature inside of it. Come to find 2 living creatures inside of it. They mistreat and exploit one another, and if it wasn't clear enough this film was expanding upon the themes of greed and human corruption present in the film Mothra, they attempt to buy Mothra's fairies and use them as slaves in a similar move to what Nelson did in the last movie. And Godzilla doesn't represent the atomic bomb because he's representing America. Godzilla represents the atomic bomb because he's a walking reminder of the ugliest side of humanity.
Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
Godzilla is a side of humanity beyond greed, beyond redemption. Godzilla is a living death that sweeps across the land. Infant Island and the natives represent the victims of humanity's worst side. They have been wronged by man's capitalistic instincts and man's self-destructive nature. They have been through the brunt of everything, and they are bitter and untrusting because of it. They are willing to let Sakai, Junko, and Professor Mirai die with their evil, corrupt counterparts because they have given up. When our heroes show up on the island, they are blamed for Godzilla's destruction. The chief states, Godzilla was born from the sins of humanity, and as such, we are our own demise. The victims of humanity's wrongdoings blame everyone for what happened, not just those responsible. If there's one scene that truly exemplifies why Mothra vs Godzilla is such a beautiful film on both a thematic and filmmaking level, it's the Sacred Springs scene. About halfway through the movie, everything slows down as our characters discover the Shobijin singing in the last green section of Infant Island. The set is gorgeous, everything looks lush, and it's one of the prettiest environments to ever be featured in a kaiju film. The pond the girls sit in front of is calming. The song is beautiful. If I had to use one word to describe this moment, the word would be tranquil. Our heroes plea with the Shobijin for forgiveness and help, and in return, they plea with the islanders. It's the good in humanity appealing to those who are wronged by the bad, looking for redemption. But they aren't searching for redemption for themselves. They're looking for redemption for the species. It's humanity crying out all at once, saying, "We are not too far gone." The dialogue is incredibly powerful, regardless of which version of this film you watch. Mirai admits it's a selfish request and is denied upon asking for help. And although it's been made clear to them that there is no faith in humanity anymore, that their word can't be trusted, Sakai, Junko, and Mirai don't give up. Junko stands up and gives an eloquent speech that is universal. It's one built on unity and forgiveness, one that asks for kindness and understanding, one that asks for the difference of man to be set aside so we can all come together. It's a message that is just as important now as it was 56 years ago. And I struggle to pick which version of this speech I like more, because the speech speech in both the English and Japanese versions of this movie resonate so much and are so powerful that it must be heard.
Do not blame every one of us for what has happened. The good are being killed as well as the evil. Are you going to let innocent men die alongside of guilty men? You have no right to decide that. That right is sacred. My friends and I appeal to you with the utmost humility. Refuse us and everyone will die.
As if Yunko's speech wasn't enough, Sakai steps in and supports her. He explains that the good are in the same position as everyone else. They distrust and fear too, and all they want is a world with peace. Everyone wants the same thing here. Yunko states that we are all equal in the eyes of the gods, and her statement was heard. God listened and God responded. At the end of the scene, it isn't the natives who decide to forgive humanity and lend their help. It isn't the Shōvujin, it's Mothra.
Mothra! Mothra! Mothra
is the symbol for hope and justice. Mothra is the ultimate embodiment of all that is good. She is a god who judges humanity, and her judgment is that there is still hope. We are all truly equal in the eyes of the gods. Before Mothra can save the day, we witness the self-destructive nature present in the worst of man. Torahata and Kumiyama wind up confronting one another, and things turn physical. They have a fight which is far more brutal and graphic than what we normally see in Godzilla films of this era. This isn't done for shock value. This is a visceral moment in which the corrupt consume themselves. Kumiyama seeks revenge on Torahata after being exploited by him, and Torahata is so wrapped up in his own self-interest that he's willing to murder his business partner. But things don't stop there. Godzilla appears and damns them both. Although Torahata had a chance to escape, his greed prevents him from evacuating the hotel in time, and Godzilla is ultimately the one who destroys them both. Greed and corruption were consumed by the embodiment of man's sin. And so Mothra flies in to fight Godzilla. The most positive aspects of humanity come to a head-to-head clash with the most negative aspects of humanity. It's human sin versus justice. And even though Mothra is temporarily defeated, all is not lost. Hope can never die. Mothra represents life, death, and rebirth as a character. And in the end, hope is reborn even stronger than it was before. Mothra returns to defeat Godzilla, proving that justice will prevail. In the process of beating Godzilla, Mothra also protects the future. A group of children stranded on the island Godzilla heads to are saved by both hope and kindness as Mothra distracts Godzilla while Sakai, Yunko, and Mirai evacuate the children. Beyond its incredibly impactful, resilient, and important message, Mothra vs. Godzilla is a beautiful film that has a lot of heart. Shinkichi Sekizawa brought his lighter touch to the Godzilla franchise for the second time with this movie, his first being King Kong vs. Godzilla. Sekizawa's films were always much more hopeful than the films written by fellow Showa Godzilla writer Takashi Kimura. Although I absolutely love and respect Kimura's cynical take on things, I think it's important to focus on something a little more positive at the moment. Sekizawa and Honda work to apply human moments to Mothra vs. Godzilla without ever crossing into parody or making things too campy within the film. I wanted to quickly highlight some of my favorite moments of humor and levity in this movie. There are a lot of genuinely funny interactions between the characters. At one point, Torahata is calling out Yunko and asks if she has Mothra's power of attorney, and Kumiyama just eats it up. There's also Jiro Nakamura, who serves as comic relief throughout the film. There's some irony with him constantly eating eggs while investigating Mothra's egg, and there's a lot of little gags with him that bring the mood of the entire film up. Murata is also a pretty funny character who really shines in the scene where they decide to ask Mothra for help. And there are a lot of little physical moments that make the film great as well. There's a moment when Sakai is looking for the Shōvujin under a table, and he gets excited and bangs his head on the table, which is awesome. There's also a really fun exchange between him and the natives of Infant Island where he hesitates to drink the red juice. If you've seen Mothra, you know the juice expels radioactive toxins from the body, but he doesn't know that, so he hesitates to drink it until pressured to gulp it down. The final thing I want to leave you with is the final thing the movie leaves us with. After Mothra and the Shōvujin help to save the day, they return to Infant Island, leaving the film's heroes feeling like they're in their debt. Sakai and Mirai respond by stating, unlike in other kaiju films of the time, this movie doesn't end on a downer. Serizawa doesn't sacrifice his life to defeat Godzilla only for Yamane to realize that another Godzilla could be born at any time. A diplomatic solution isn't failed to be reached, resulting in two brothers, Sanda and Gaira, resorting to violence leading to their mutual destruction. The forces of good in the world unite to stop the forces of evil, and although evil can never be killed, Godzilla is stopped and hope triumphs. Thank you guys all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I will see you guys next time for the next one. D-Man, out.
Just as you distrust us, so we distrust others as well. It's wrong. We're all human. As humans, we're responsible to each other. We are related. Refuse us and you abandon your brothers. We must learn to help each other.